We good? Yes, we are. Well, since I kept tipping over all the music stands, they gave me this high table here. And because of the high table there, this is about as California style as you can get. So I decided to wear my my nice shirt to make Earl and Cora feel at home there. If you've been with us for the past couple months, we're walking ourselves through the book of Exodus to be able to understand who is God. How does Yahweh reveal himself to us? And so, since we spent some time just saying, hey, God, speak to us, show us, let us thank you for what you've been doing, just with what Ethan shared right there. I'd like you to turn to somebody around you, and if you haven't been here before, look and see if somebody looks new, and they might not have something there, but they might have something just from their own experience that they go, oh, this has really stood out to me. Share one thing about who God is that's shown up to you in the book of Exodus. How has God revealed himself through that? So go ahead and share, and then we'll jump in. What's one thing that you shared or that you heard? What's God shown you through the book of Exodus about his character? He's long-suffering, okay? Thankfully for me and for Lori, he is long-suffering. Tim, what stood out to you in the book of Exodus about who God is? His greatness. So he's really powerful. He's really awesome. Lydia? Or, yes. He's faithful. Okay. So he stays with us even when maybe he seems distant. Right? Okay. Charlie? He's what? Yes. He wants to speak, but oftentimes we're not. It isn't that God doesn't speak. It's that most of the time we're just not listening in the process, right? So the last that we left off in Exodus, we left off with the 10 Commandments, and now we're going to get into like all the rules that keep on coming. This is the part that your year-long commitment to reading through the Bible begins to waver, and then you say, you know what, maybe I'll make it through this. I will try. God, I love you so much. This is my sacrifice to you. I hope that as we walk through the rest of Exodus, that from Exodus 20 to the end, that's when you really see God come alive. Because I think that's when God really comes alive. That's when Yahweh shows up. He shows us who he is in ways we're not used to hearing who God is. And it is something that through the rest of the Old Testament, we talked about this in the 10 Commandments, is that when the rest of the history of the people of Israel, when they look back at the law, what's their reaction? Woo-hoo! That's their reaction to law. It is the best thing they've ever received. And that is not our reaction at all. We're complete opposite. And I think the reason why is because we just don't understand it. And so we took an excursus last week. It's a big word, a little side road to be able to explore some stuff. So we went into the book of Romans. And when we went to that book of Romans, what we saw as we read through that is hopefully you saw, for those of you who are studying it and those who just got to sit here and soak it in, the law is actually a gift for Christians as much as it is for the Jews 2,000 years ago. It's a gift. It is God's instruction to his eternal people. Now, we're going to have to wrestle with that. And one of the things that I hope shows up in this is that when Paul is talking, he's talking to a particular group of people who don't want to have anything to do with the Spirit. They only want the law. We're familiar with that. So he needs to do what all arguments do. Go to the far extreme to show how inadequate something is. Did the law ever make anybody totally righteous? No, and it never will. It's incapable of making people righteous. It shows sin is Paul's argument that shows up in this passage. But what it also shows is it shows just how desperately we're in need for a king who makes restitution for us and always stands in the gap, right? They always got to go every single time they mess up. How would you like that life? always like, am I good with God? Am I not good with God? And he's just like, you're good with God. Because you know what? He took care of it once and for all, is what the writer of Hebrews is going to finally say. And then he takes the rest of his argument through the book of Romans, and he says, the Spirit actually is an incredible guide. An incredible guide. But here's the thing. The Spirit is jazz. And you guys like jazz? Right? Some of us do, some of us don't, because jazz is just playing in the moment. It's feeling the mood change. It's feeling the rhythm change. It's picking it up, and it's moving with it. It's why just the other week, God told me don't give anything to that person who was totally needy. And somebody in the exact same situation, he said, give to them. The law would only have one answer. The Spirit's like jazz. But all jazz is built off what? It's built off basic chords that you learn when you're 4, 5, 6 years old, right? The law is the basic chords. They're the foundations of the life of the Spirit. They show us who God really is, and they show us his character. And hopefully, I'll be able to help unpack this as we actually talk about God's laws. The passage we're going to talk about and that we're at today is chapter 24, where they ratify the covenant. And they say, yes, we want to be your people. We want to be, in essence, the only covenantal relationship we have in our lives that is common is marriage. My relationship with you isn't based upon you doing your job, and if you don't do your job, then I have every right to walk away. It's, I have made a relationship with you, and I promise to do my part, no matter even if you don't do yours. That's what a covenant is. It's not an agreement. And God made this with his people. I am going to make a covenant with you, and I ask you to covenant with me. And covenants are promises. They're vows. They're statements that say, I will do this or I won't do this. And that's really basic. But a lot of times when we actually look at God and what he's doing, that doesn't sound like that's what's supposed to be going on. I want to take just a few steps back there on those slides and show you, any of you guys ever seen this or put this up in your classroom? All I really needed to know I learned in kindergarten. Have you any of you read that book like 30 years ago? Okay. And the author makes this point, you know what? Everything in life goes back to these basic foundational truths. Would you like to live your life constantly of make sure to flush? Is that like the epitome of the perfect, well-ordered life? Maybe not. And in fact, if we went 400 years from now, would we still be flushing? If we went 400 years back, were we flushing? No. It was a law given within a certain time frame. And if we can get it within that time frame, then we understand what it meant to those people. God is giving instruction to an ancient people wandering through a desert 2,000 years ago, and he's trying to say to them, hey, here I am. And if we can let ourselves enter into that place, we can actually see who God is. This is the thesis I want to throw out and that I want to engage. If you have your Bibles, I want you to turn to Exodus chapter 21, and we'll go now ahead to 2 slides ahead. We're going to talk about, well, actually, before we go there, what do you notice about his elementary curriculum that he provides for them? The chords. What's his greatest focus? We do this in our world. The first thing you talk about is the most important. What's the first thing he talks about? Worship. Following on its heels, social responsibility. I put this up on a slide when I talked the last time. When Jesus summarizes the whole law, what does he say? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor like you love yourself. Where does the law start? Where do you think Jesus got that from? He didn't make it up. God was playing the chords from the very beginning and going, hey, do you get it? Dun, 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 dun. Right. And then if you don't get it within that culture of first and second, then he does it within what's kind of called a chiastic structure that we've gotten into a bunch of times. What's the thing that's in the middle? The thing that's in the middle for the second section is worship again. Love the Lord your God. That's the first commandment. Second is love your neighbor like you love yourself. God gives these 10 vows, these 10 wise sayings to live your whole life off of. And then he comes, and the first thing that he says after this is, and I want to read it because it's so life-changing. Then the Lord said to Moses, thus you will say to the sons of Israel, you shall not make other gods besides me, gods of silver, gods of gold. You shall not make for yourselves. You shall make an altar of earth for me, and you shall sacrifice it on your burnt offerings and on your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I will come to you and bless you. If you make an altar of stone for me, you shall not build it of cut stones, for if you wield your tool on it, you will profane it. And you shall not go up by steps on my altar, so that your nakedness will not be exposed on it. You blown away? Do you understand God so much more deeply? Are you excited about the law? In the ancient world, idols were part of everyday life. And the reason why you had idols, we're most familiar with like Aladdin. They were genies in a bottle. If you had the bottle, what did you have? You had control of the god. First statement out of God's mouth. I've given you the 10 wise sayings. Let me hammer this point. I'm beyond you. I will not be controlled by you. I am beyond you. Don't make me in your image. Don't set me to your standards of you just weren't gracious enough, or you just weren't loving enough, or you just didn't do this enough. Because if I was God, that's how I do it. You're not God. This is first part. And then he goes further and he says, okay, now when you make an altar, I want you to make an altar that's made of dirt. And I want you to take a few rocks and I want you to kind of mix it in with all that dirt, but don't take any stones and really make them pretty. What? What are we getting at here? Like, this is dumb. You're supposed to be God. The Jews freaked out about the law and were like, this is the best thing ever. In all the ancient world, they would make grand temples for their gods. They would make them the most extravagant things that you could ever imagine in honor of their God. But at the same moment, the moment that I make a grand temple here for the God here, what does that say about God over there? He ain't. He isn't there. When God says, here, I want you to show up anywhere in the middle of the desert, bring a bunch of rocks and some dirt and just throw it together, and there you will worship me. What is he saying about his nature? I am. Where is he? Everywhere, and all powerful everywhere. Completely would blow the mind of an ancient person. Would maybe blow the mind of some of us. Where do we think we're going to experience God's greatness? It ain't here. It's everywhere. And then here's the other thing. Don't take hundreds of years. What do we rest some of our greatest Christian achievements in all of world history on? On a bunch of cathedrals that are absolutely beautiful to see, that took centuries to build. And if we went all the way back to the law, second part of his first real commandment, he says, what? I just want simple worship. I just want simple worship. I'm awesome. I'm so beyond you. You can't impress me. Just come to me. Just come to me. Wherever you come to me. I'm there. If we could just get that. If we could just live that way in the middle of our office, at our kitchen table, anywhere. And I'm not looking for something extravagant. And then the last one he says, crazy. Don't go up on the altar because then you're going to show your nakedness. Okay, these people wore togas. We're all used to the togas. And we're like, that's really strange. What is going on there? Maybe I was tracking with the other ones. And then there's this like little addendum. What? Every single ancient culture that we look at made one human activity the center of their worship. In every single one. What was it? Anybody want to make a guess? Sex. It's the most ecstatic human experience. And God says this, let me set you straight from the beginning. Not only is sex something for you, but it's not for our worship time. I won't be controlled by it. This is exactly, and so this shows triangulation. Like when you're trying to find a point, if you can find 2 points, then it helps you get to the third. Okay, so when Paul comes to the New Testament and he's providing law, that he's just written all these things about, I don't want you to be bound by the law, but then he gives instructions and says, this is what you have to do, that we would call that law. He says, you know what? Here, I don't want you ladies walking in with braided hair. And you're like, hey, I've never walked in with jewelry braided into my hair. God must love me. I don't have any problem with this. What were the ladies in the New Testament world using braided hair with jewelry in it to show? To show their sexuality within their culture. You take that, you go all the way back to the first instruction here, and you follow it all together, and it says to all of us, worship is not about showing what? Ourselves. Get lost. Get lost. It's about whom? It's about God. It's about God himself. Always has been, always will be. It's about God. Do you see how the chords help us play jazz? How the chords show us his character that is the same yesterday, today, and forever? It's a blessing. You are not bound by this. Don't like freak out if I walk up here in a kilt and kill me, okay? It's providing a scope of how God reveals himself within certain cultures to help us grasp what he's all about. Second thing that he talks about here, and we can go to the next slide. Second thing that he talks about. Any of you guys ever been bothered by this? I hope you have. You've read the Bible well enough that the second law that he talks about is what? What's this all about? It's all about slavery. So God condones slavery. God is always working with people to take them one step closer to him than what they were before. In their world, what was unquestioned as to how life was lived? Slavery. If he completely takes them, it'd be like taking a kindergartner and saying, you know what? Addition, subtraction, you got that? Perfect. All right. I want to teach you calculus. Is calculus better math? Does it do a whole lot more for us? Yeah, far beyond addition and subtraction. But what do you have to do in order to get to calculus? You got to go through all these steps of learning how to do all these different parts. And that is, who said long-suffering? God is incredibly long-suffering with his creation. You know what? You don't get it. And you're so far off of what my plans are that it's going to take literally centuries to move you along this path. But let me provide you within your culture a certain track to be able to understand what my character is about. The first thing that he says there is he wants all the slaves to be set free every 6 years. Why? Who are these people he's speaking to? He's speaking to the Jews. Who are the Jews 4 months ago in this narrative? They're slaves. What does God say about his love for other people? He says it starts where you live. It'd be like God showing up and saying, how do I love my wife best? How do I love my sister best? How do I love my coworker? God wants to give us instruction where we live. He wants to help us learn how to live everyday life in the place that we live everyday life. So he says, you know what? Here. And this is God, imagine this. He's brilliant. In the 1960s, I want to say, they decided that Brazil was going to set free all of the Native Americans that had been enslaved and kept captive to be able to work for their European overlords for years. They set those people free, and guess what they did once they had their freedom? They went home and they enslaved all their other friends. Why? Because the oppressor or the oppressed always becomes the oppressor. You pass on what you've learned unless you learn a different way. And you don't learn a different way overnight. It's not just instruction. If you ever want to read a great book, it's by Paulo Freire called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. They sent a Catholic monk in to be able to help guide these people through restructuring their entire culture. And basically what he shows is the entire structure of the law. That you got to give them specifics and make it culturally appropriate and help them learn how to live in that place for that time, and then they can begin to become wise and learn how to apply it beyond that and all that kind of stuff. Imagine, God had this stuff figured out long before we ever showed up. To run through this, every 6 years, for those of you who are business owners or work at that level of having employees, what is the hardest thing inside of the business world? To find new employees, retention. When you have a good business structure and you have good employees, what's the last thing you want to let go? Good employees. What does God say about the good employees every 6 years? Get rid of them. Get rid of them. Who does he want them to trust for their businesses and for their lives? It isn't the people that you have working for you, it's me. Wow. Like, that's a great truth. That comes through the law. Right after that, he says he wants families to stay together. They'd often give them a wife. You're a little bit more happy if you have a wife to live with for most of the time. And you're there, you have kids, and regularly then if the slave decided to leave, then they would just, now I got 4 out of my 1. The slave master must make them a permanent part of the family if they decide they want that family and want to stay with them. Not a part of the ancient world. Families weren't important. It was just creating more workers for yourself. God says, no, families are what we sacrifice everything for. And then here's the last one. In the ancient world, they would sell their daughters. They were just poor, and they would sell them to be able to work. And this slavery it's harsher. You'll hear some of the instruction. They were able to go a little bit further than what we could in our modern world to get people to do the things that they wanted them to do. But by and large, this was just long-term employment. And you got it up front. So you'd be near to death and you'd sell your daughter and you'd sell her for, in the Hebrew world, for 6 years of service. You'd get that 6 years of service in your hand the moment that you handed your daughter over. Now, in the ancient world, what you could do is that daughters, women, were available to be used for sexual needs. You'll see this in the story of Sarai and Hagar. Okay? If you needed to produce more offspring, more people to work the fields, then you could use your slaves in order to make more children, to work the fields and do all that kind of stuff. Well, I have had sex, I had a baby, now I am set free after 6 years. Guess what's not going to happen inside the ancient world with a girl who's already had a baby? She will not be picked up because she's been defiled. So she is promised a life of living in prostitution because that's the only thing open to her. Her family can't take her back because there's no financial benefit to it. And she is used goods. So what does he say? You can't redeem her the way that you would a man. You can't just let her go. And you have to find a way to care for this woman. You can't just push her to the side when you find a new slave or you find a new wife. Is this the stuff that like speaks to us and we're like, oh, now I know what I need to do next week? Not specifically, right? But what does it do? It shows us God's eternal character. The law is chords to help us play jazz so that the Spirit can really just put a symphony of glory together through our lives of obedience. You can go to the next slide. So, what happens? People all show up, and this is in chapter 24. They're there at the foot of the mountain. Moses reads all these laws to them, and what's their response? We read it earlier. Everything you said we will do. And he kills these animals, and he takes the blood, and he sprinkles it on them because it was sprinkled on the altar, and he says, you are cleansed. And they commit themselves to this. This whole thing, it's really foreign to us. Basically, it's where I was at 2 weeks ago on Sunday when I did a wedding ceremony. I get the front row seat. I get to have these people right in front of me. And they said, you know what? I will love you all the time. I will, like, whenever you're sick, I won't ever complain. Whenever we don't have any money, I'll be like, you know what? That is great. Let's just live off of crackers for 3 more weeks. I love you. I'll never say, why can't we buy this house? Or why do we have to keep going to your mother's? Or why? I'll never say that. And they look into each other's eyes, and with a passion, what do they say? Everything you've asked from me, I will do. I will do it for you. I love you. And then the other one on the other side with the same passion. No one's better than you. Nothing will I hold back. What are the children of Israel doing with Yahweh? Everything you've asked for, I will do. Oh, what a great God. You're so good. And it's really hard. Like, I love being right there, but I've been a married man for a little over 20 years. If I'm around Cora, I'm almost close to hysterical when they're saying their vows. Like, yeah, tell me how that one works out. Why go through the vows? Why go through vows if we know from practical experience that we are going to fall so far short? Because it's arguments at 10 o'clock at night on a Thursday when you say, maybe we should just get divorced. This just is not working. I can't. Why did I ever love you? What did I ever see in you? And what do we get reminded of? These things that we didn't know we were committing ourselves to. But these things that are absolutely essential to relationship. God knows where he wants to take these people. He knows how many dumb, stupid choices they're going to make for centuries. For centuries. And he takes their vows and he doesn't laugh. And he says, I love your heart. I love your passion. Does he say the same thing to us? do we realize that we've taken a covenantal vow? That when he showed up in our most broken place and we saw no hope, and we said, God, I will give you everything because I love you, because you love me. You're so good. Oh, all the stuff you've done. And then real life comes. Can we commit to that, or could we recommit to that? Because he isn't walking away, because he made a what? He made a covenant. And he's given us the chords. And he's tried to walk us through all the stages of learning how to play. Play for his glory. And he wants to use you and me in ways we can't even imagine. Don't give up. Don't walk away. Don't say I'm finished. Don't say it's too much. Don't say, what did I ever see in you? Or even worse, what did you ever see in me? He's cleansed us. It's all done. It's all right. And not only that, but he has something even more equally awesome. The end of chapter 23, after all of this instruction, and right before we get to chapter 24, it says that God says, you know what, I'm gonna send an angel to you, and my name is going to be in him. If his name is in him, he's the angel God, or the angel of, if some of you guys know the Bible, angel of the Lord. I'm going to send you the angel of the Lord. He's going to walk ahead of you. He's going to guard you. He's going to do all this stuff. And this is exactly what happens in the book of Joshua. Who shows up as soon as they enter the land in chapter 25? It's the angel of God's armies. And what does he do throughout all of their battles and everything else? He walks them through everywhere they're supposed to go in that whole entire process. And he says, I want you to listen to him. If you listen to him, then he's going to wipe away all of your enemies from in front of you. But he's not going to do it overnight, because if they did it overnight, then this land would lie fallow and it would just be a mess by the time you get there. So I'm just going to barely be in front of you. But if you keep trusting me and taking whatever steps you need to take, then what? You will have an Ozalam you didn't have to lift a finger for, and will be an absolute blessing for you. And I'm going to use these people who are the worst sinners ever. As we look back at ancient history and all the horrible, nasty stuff that these guys did, and I'm going to actually move them away so most of these people have a second chance. Imagine that. This long-suffering God. And I'm going to use the worst of sinners to bring you the best of blessings. If you will just, what? Just listen. It's the word Shema. It's the word that isn't just here. It's here so you actually can do something with it. And then we jump over and it gets into chapter 24, and it tells us all about just like them making this covenant and ratifying it. And then Moses and the 70 elders go up the mountain. And when they go up the mountain, then it gets to this. They sit down and they have this big old huge feast. And they see God. Now, throughout Exodus and throughout Scripture, what does it say? You can't what? You can't see God. So most scholars, when they look at this aspect of it, go to the next slide there. If it comes up, it doesn't show up as well. That's lapis lazuli. That's the sapphire, or I forget the other way that it's talked about or translated inside of your Bibles. they see underneath his feet something as blue as this. It's the bluest blue in the ancient world. It's like looking up into the sky when it's the bluest blue. When we think of heaven in all of its fullness and glory, what color comes to our mind? Blue, right? Maybe gold in there, but blue, like here's the sky, here's all the heavens. They see underneath his feet. Scholars say, you know what? The reason why these people didn't die is because they didn't see God. What'd they see? They saw his feet. And they sat down at his feet. And they had a supper at his feet. What do they get familiar with? His feet. What a wonderful thing to have in front of you when you're eating a great meal. Look at those feet. Aren't those beautiful? What's God going to do for the rest of the 40 years in the desert? He's going to lead them. You know how I like to be led? You know what, Jason? So 3 years from now, you're going to go and you're going to live in this place, and you're going to do these 5 things, and then after that, then you'll move over here, and then this will be happening, and then, and he'll lay out my whole life for me. Has that happened for anybody yet? Because if so, I need to talk with you, because it has not happened for me. You know what God has done? All he shows me over and over and over and over and over and over and over again is the next step. What do you step with? You step with your feet. When I was a little kid, I'm not getting choked up about this, I just didn't breathe well. When I was a little kid, I went to my grandpa's in Ohio. And they lived just far enough from the lake that they got something called lake effect snow. So it kind of hits the side, and then it gets all this moisture, and then it goes in about like 15 to 20 miles and just dumps snow. And so he would set up all this wood up close to the house so that he could keep everybody warm. And after a while, when you have a bunch of people there, then all the firewood goes out, and you got to go across the whole 3-mile field to go get more wood. And it's like, Grandpa, why couldn't you put it all closer? He looked at me, we were all getting cold, and he said, hey, Jason, time to go get some firewood. And I was like, all right, put on everything you got. I'm putting on everything I got. I'm expecting to go around the corner. We go to the corner where the normal wood pile is, and there's nothing there. I'm like, Grandpa, weren't we going to get firewood? And he says, yeah, it's over there. Okay, I'm about 11, 12 years old. He starts off across the field, and I'm going, and he finally got to one little rise in the field, and he looked back, and it was like from here to the back wall, and we've only started 2 minutes in. And I'm like, does this guy have snowshoes on? What is going on? I cannot make my way through this. And he looks back at me. He sees all the distance. And I am literally at this point clawing my way through the snow, going, how am I going to make it over there? And once I get there, how am I going to make it back with any kind of wood? He looks at me and he says, Jason, what are you doing? And I said, I'm trying to go across the field, Grandpa. We're going to get wood. And he just looks at me so simply, and he says, just walk in my footsteps. We're trying so hard to make our lives work. Trying so hard to figure out stuff, to make the best, so we could bring God the most glory, and we could be his great people and his great servants. And a lot of you are exactly where I'm at. You're winded. You're clawing your way, just working harder and harder and harder, trying to do what? You thought it was that, but now you're wondering, maybe it wasn't. And he's looking at you and me like he was looking at a bunch of elders thousands of years ago and just said, hey, just sit down long enough and enjoy my presence long enough so you get used to the smell of my feet. So you know what they look like. And when I take a step somewhere, just step in my feet. Just step in my feet. Just follow my footsteps, and I'll get you to where you need to be. You can put the next slide up. More scholars connect Exodus 24 to the Lord's Supper than any other passage inside of the Old Testament. God's called us to follow him. He's given us instruction. And we regularly fall short, right? And yet he says, I, through the blood of my son, have sprinkled your hearts clean. Guess what tense that is? It's forever. It's aorist. It's ongoing. It never ends. We don't live a life of constant sacrifice. Are we in good stand with God? He says, you're good. I did it all. And that's what the table is for. Not to get back into good standing, but to remind ourselves it's always good. It's always good. And the next thing, we're supposed to get around those tables and we're supposed to slow down enough and eat a supper in front of him. The early church called it the love feast. To sit there long enough so you smell his feet. So you see what they look like again. And you can walk out of here just taking one step into his footsteps. Following him wherever he's going to lead you. Sometimes it's going to feel like it's just chords. It's just basic. But if you can trust him there, then he's going to do good work and he's going to play jazz in and through his people. Through a group of us that are just playing our instrument and our part and can riff off each other to bring him the most glory. So today, as we head to the table, let's head to the table with Exodus 24 ringing in our ears and the law of God being a reminder that God is good and gracious and works with us with where we're at to get us down this road so that we really can live life to its fullest. God, thank you. Thank you that you showed up. You showed up thousands of years ago to a people that didn't deserve you, and we're still there. And you said, here, let me show you the basics. And the most basic is, here I am. I want you to see me and my character. I don't want other people. I don't want other cultures. I don't want other religions. I don't want anything else to tell you who I am. I only want my revelation to tell you who I am. And if you'll follow me, this isn't an obedience of, let me show you how inadequate you are. It's an obedience of truly a bunch of knuckleheads. I know who you are, but you'll come one step closer to me than what you were before if you just trust. And there's no condemnation there. It's already been forgiven. All the mistakes you're going to make, already done. You're set free. You're cleansed. I just want you to be familiar with me. Familiar enough that whenever I take a step, you see it. You don't miss it and you follow me. Because I want to take you some good places and I want to bless your socks off. I want to settle you in a good, good land. Just follow me. Thank you that you are the same yesterday, today, and forever. May your name be praised. Amen.